Welcome to the State of the Nation Weekly Update with me, Mike Sham. This week I'd like to put the focus back on the Government of National Unity, which was obviously the hot topic for the last couple of months, gone a little bit quiet. But it's just struck me that many analysts, myself included, have got this all wrong. We were looking at winners and losers of the Government of National Unity, and it was easy to analyze that the ANC had been the big winner, despite losing their majority and losing 17% of their support, going all the way down from 57% of the vote. They went down to less than 40%. But yet, they kept their hands on all the levers of power. Very, very easy to deduce that the ANC was the big winner. They've got the president, deputy president, they dominate the cabinet, they're in all the important posts in the cabinet. And then, of course, if one looks at the provinces, well, there the story is even better for the ANC. They lost support in every single one of the provinces. And in 3 of the provinces, where they had a majority in the previous administration, they lost that majority. KZN, where they really took a hiding, going all the way down to 17% from just above 50. Gauteng, where they also had just above 50, they go down to about 34.5%. And then a small one in the Northern Cape, where they fell below 50% from always having been comfortably above it. But yet in all 3 of those provinces, they managed to stay in power in one form or another. Admittedly, in KZN, in a coalition where the IFP is actually running KZN. So one can be excused for saying that the ANC were the big winners of the Government of National Unity. Well, I am challenging that today. The ANC were in fact the big losers of the GNU, and the longer this goes on, the more the ANC are losing. Let me explain what I'm saying, because this week it became absolutely clear. So if we take an election as being the will of the people, and sometimes the will of the people must be listened to. The will of the people comes in and it says, we don't like what you're doing here, Party A, but we do like what you're doing there, Party B. You know, this was an absolute lesson. It's what politicians dream of, is these lessons that the voters give you, so that you can then act accordingly. Do something about that lesson that you got from your voters. Well, by keeping their hands on the levers of power as the ANC did, I'm arguing that they are the big losers. Because what was the big message that voters sent to the ANC? They said, things have to change. There are certain things that we are unhappy about, and they need to change. And by keeping their hands on the levers of power, I'm not sure, in fact, I am sure that the ANC have not even begun to learn those lessons. And the problem here lies squarely with President Cyril Ramaphosa, who's proved 2 things. One is that he's a skillful negotiator. Very well done. He negotiated those Government of National Unity talks. Well negotiated, in some cases great negotiation, in some cases downright deceit, to keep his hands on power. But he's a very poor leader. Poor leaders don't listen to their markets. This is what happens in business. People are telling you they want this particular product and you give them that product. They're telling you that they want your product to change, or competitors come out with something better, you must respond to it. If you're a bad leader, you don't respond to it. And Cyril Ramaphosa just refuses to lead and listen to what people are telling him. So let's have a look at why I'm saying this. Well, let's start off with jobs for pals. Right, so they lose these provinces but manage to stay there. So in other words, many of the ANC members who deserve to lose their jobs actually keep their jobs. In Parliament and in the Cabinet, it's so ridiculous that we bloat the hell out of the Cabinet. 34 Cabinet positions with God knows how many deputy ministers. right? Yes, some were given to other parties, but that gets made up by growing the number so that you can keep more ANC people employed. It makes the cabinet less effective. You've got some of these absolute rubbish portfolios. Science and technology, played in Zamandi. What science and technology is there in the bottom of the whiskey bottle? I don't understand it. The guy's done nothing, but yet you keep those departments alive. So the lesson that was sent loudly and clearly to the ANC is, we have to tighten our belts, you have to tighten your belt. But no, lesson not learned. Then let's talk about the one that came up this week, and that is corruption. South Africa is finished with corruption. We've had enough. There's not anybody outside of Mkhonto Wesizwe who still thinks corruption is a good idea. So what happens? He appoints Thembi Sibilani as the Minister of Justice, knowing that she's compromised, that she's got a question to answer. She was heavily involved in the VBS scandal in the early days as mayor of Polokwane. And then it's unearthed that the woman is sort of like a mini version of what Jacob Zuma did. She's got no money, but she's spending a fortune, which she can't obviously get through her position. It's dirty money by people that are linked to VBS. The scandal is brewing. And instead of dealing with the scandal in the obvious way, which is to relieve her of her position and go through a sort of a prosecutorial process that we can see whether she's innocent or not, and then decide what to do with her. No. Instead of doing that, President Ramaphosa decides it's a good idea to keep her as a cabinet minister, but just swap her from justice. Because, it looks a bit lousy to have a justice minister who breaks the law. As if the poor people who need homes need a compromised minister as Minister of Human Settlements. What message are you sending to people? And are you not learning the lesson that the population of South Africa have given you, that we don't want any more corruption? No. Lesson not learned. Right? Now, lessons are only worthwhile if you learn them. So let's talk about some of the provinces. Once again, through great negotiation and in some cases deceit, the ANC managed to hold on to power, especially in Gauteng, where they lost a majority and end up just marginally ahead of the Democratic Alliance in support. And instead of forming a sort of a province of national unity, with the backing of the ANC seniors, Gauteng remains completely in the hands of the ANC. Is this a good thing? Well, if you've got power, especially political power, especially at a time like this, you better be making a difference in people's lives. But no. You turn on a tap in Gauteng and water doesn't run through it. You drive at night and the street lights don't work. You pull up at a traffic light, you better stop because the light ain't working. People are dying. Buildings are catching on fire, etc. The hospitals are a mess. These are all done by the province. So you've kept power, you've become the face of it, you look really clever by holding on to power. Well, stick around, because voters have sent you a message that they want improved service delivery. You think that they're going to be impressed by the fact that you held on to power. You haven't learnt the lesson. The lesson is we want service delivery. If you haven't heard it, wait for the next election. Right, so we take the next thing to look at, and that is the composition of the cabinet. So I mentioned this earlier, that you bloat the cabinet, you add ministries, you do all sorts of things. In other words, to keep your pals in ministerial positions. So what we have in cabinet is, 25 odd ANC ministers, and I think it's about 9 or 10 that go to other parties. Well, it seems clever because you've got all of these jobs. But the problem is that the ministers from the other parties are doing so much better than your ministers. So by having more and more ministers doing less and less and doing it poorly, you're not really helping. You're not hearing the lesson that people said. We have to tighten our belts. We need to deliver more. You need to deliver more. Instead, you think, much like the provinces, is a good thing to hold on to power. Well, that's a double-edged sword. Because if you don't deliver, people are going to deliver a vote that's not in your favor. Once again, lesson not learned. Even if one looks at foreign policy, ramrod ANC foreign policy down the throats of South Africans without consultation. And now you have a situation where South Africa is the front man for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. South Africa is the front man for Hamas in their war against Israel and the anti-Israeli thing where they took them to the ICJ. Right? South Africa is the front man for BRICS. And then what happens? Donald Trump gets elected as President of America. So instead of using your foreign policy as a way to improve South Africa's standing in the world or to improve the South African economy, you've chosen instead to run with your foreign policy, and it's going to hurt us economically. Anybody mention AGOA? That's due to be renegotiated. Right? You don't see countries like India or China taking a front row seat in these arguments. For good reason. They understand that whoever carries the flag at the front, saying what a good idea it is to have a BRICS currency, is the guy most likely to get shot by the sniper. That's South Africa. That's our president. Right? Not learning the lesson that voters have said, which is to say, for once, put South Africans first. Why are we talking about putting South Africans first? We've got this dreadful issue of zama-zamas and spaza shops, which is the same issue. There's basically two issues there. Porous borders, in fact, three issues there. Porous borders, lack of policing, and lack of municipal oversight of places that are, in the case of spaza shop owners. In each case, you've chosen to hold on to power, and now people are dying, and people are unhappy. Do South Africans like this? No. Why? We've got 50% unemployment. Are you not hearing the message that voters are sending you? Voters are sending you to say, this is over. We want you to look after South Africa's interests. Seemed clever at the time when you just sort of let everybody through the border, or you supported ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe, supporting Frelimo in Mozambique, where they've just done some sort of interesting stuff with their election. But at the end of the day, South Africans are the ones that are suffering with high unemployment. But voters have sent you the message. The message is, put South Africa first for a change. So, to sum up, what am I saying here? I'm saying that we got this all wrong. We all think that the ANC was a big winner from the government out of this government of national unity. They're the big loser. And it's going to get worse for them. Because the more they keep on doing these things, the more they're going to get shown up. The more voters are going to punish them at the next general election. In fact, the next local government election and the next general election. The simple reality is when people get into the polling booth, they vote in their own interests. They vote and say, who is most likely to ensure that water runs out of this tap when I turn it on? And they might just, as we've seen, vote for somebody else. Now, we remember South Africa just a few years ago, a decade ago, 5 years ago, was the protest capital of the world. We were having an extraordinary amount of protests. But suddenly it stopped. Why? Why has protest stopped? Why don't we see the burning tires and angry people on national roads? Why? If you think about it, a protest is a simple thing. You want to get the people in charge to listen to you so that they can change their way. They've tried. South Africans have tried for 25 years many, many supporters of the ANC have tried to get the attention of the ANC by protest to say, hear us, we're not happy, come and fix whatever is troubling us. Then it suddenly stopped. And why? Because they realized that all the protests in the world was not going to lead to the ANC actually listening to them. So what did they do? They took their protests to the ballot box. So we no longer have those protests where people, burn tires and sing and dance. We now simply go to the ballot box and vote for another party. So the ANC gets sent messages all the time and chooses to ignore them every time. This is why South Africa is not growing. This is why unemployment isn't being eaten into. This is why, sewage runs through the streets. Elections are coming. They're always with us. And the ANC is going to struggle to do this. They might do well in the odd by-election. But when everybody put those cards on the table, it might look pretty ugly for the ANC. And I've got to say that if you look at the Government of National Unity and everybody says they're the winner, tell me which of those parties is going to lose support to another of the parties. And I can tell you, every single one of those other parties stocks will have risen by spending time in the Government of National Unity. The ANC will have shed support because of their time in the Government of National Unity, because they want to keep on holding on to power rather than deliver services. So far from being a great win for the ANC, as everybody sees the Government of National Unity as being, it's going to be a terrible loss. So remember this before you say, the ANC held on to all the power and that's good for them. May not be so good for them. Remember, support Pace Car Rental. Go and rent a car from them. Use a special code, SONA, when you go and hire the car and get a discount. And subscribe to The State of the Nation. We'll see you again next week. Thank you.